Hi, everyone.
Dan and Nancy Leffler here with Being with Grief.
And we're here for the next in our series of Changing the Conversation Around Grief webinar.
Exactly. Today, our topics range from resources in grief and also transformation.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm just going to see if I can find a way to, there we go. So we were going to put this in speaker mode. It's in gallery mode. Let's see if I can pin us. Okay, if I put it in speaker mode now. There we go. All right. We're here today for the third in our series of conversations, changing the conversation around grief. And as Dan said, today we're going to be talking about resources and transformation, and maybe in some cases, transformation, resources for transformation. So first of all, we want to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say transformation. We look at this on several different levels.
And transformation for me means that different levels and different phases throughout the work. There's the immediate transformation that happens once you're in a traumatic situation. Instantly, your life changes and things are not the same as they were. And over the course of our discussions and the presentations that we've been presenting, we've talked about how we came to understand our transition from our grief into the people that we are today. And along the way, learned and want to share the lessons with you.
So transformation, as Dan said, immediately after you experience a loss, no matter what that loss is, you're transformed into a grieving person. And you may be, I've been hearing this word all week, gobsmacked and not know how to respond, not know what to do. And so that's one definition of transformation. And there's the transformation that you make along the way, transforming from someone in early grief to someone who's in the next level of grief. And when I talk about the transformation that I experienced, it's more about I transformed into the person that I always wanted to be. I transformed into, I came back home to myself, and I was able to transform the layers of protection that I kept around myself that kept me from being my best self, which were also a part of my childhood wounds. And I had been doing a lot of work on those childhood wounds before Leah died. And yet this ripping apart of our lives, of my life, that as that fabric was ripped apart, when we as a couple, and when I myself went back to start to weave in the lessons we were learning, follow the breadcrumbs, begin to learn how to feel my feelings better. In the act of doing that, I also was able to reach deep into those wounds and heal them on a level that I hadn't been able to achieve before. So that's also the transformation that's possible when you say yes to your grief journey, when I said yes to my grief journey.
And the same thing for me. I found out that my transformation was not something that came upon me all at once. It continues to evolve.
Yes.
And it has become part of my story, but it is not my whole story.
And it doesn't define who you are as a person
anymore.
And it did. For me, it did.
Yes. there was a time, and the evolution of that, the journey, how, the beginning part that you mentioned was the trauma of, your life getting turned upside down and everything being so overwhelming, to that middle stage where I constantly ask myself, what's next, and
And I think that's an important distinction, because so many people that we've seen, that we've come into contact with, that we've talked with, get stuck in that early transformation of they're in uncharted territory, new territory, and we don't know what to do. And so as you continue to ask that question of what's next, even if you don't know, just by asking the question, you're opening up the possibility of getting an answer. You may not know what that answer is.
you may not like the answer.
Well, you may, but that's the we were talking about earlier this week. That's what happens when you make an intention, or that's what happens when you say a prayer.
Mhm.
You are appealing to a higher power, no matter who that higher power is to you, whether it's God or the universe, the divine. When we say what's next, we are asking for help. And that's where the resources come into play, because when we ask for help, whether it's when we're talking about resources too, there's many levels. There's resources from the inside that we do for ourselves, and external, what we're calling here external resources. You want to talk a little bit about external resources?
Well, yeah, and again, in the early grief, the direction that the resources occur is toward you. And I'm thinking in terms of the trauma support that you get, whether it is the ambulance that comes to assist, or it is
Or the social worker in the hospital.
exactly. Those are services that are being brought to you in the evolution. Term I've used is of your grief. The what I found was that has now turned around and has become a source that I give to others, and part of that is the transformation to what I would call my more authentic self.
Right, and then you're in service to others, to be a resource for them. Some of the other external services that may that you may want to look into for specifically for grief, and it depends on your circumstances. That there's a wide variety of places to go, like hospice. If your loved one was in hospice, or even if they weren't, hospice does have grief support, and your local hospice will be able to let you know what that is. There's also all kinds of groups for specific groups of people. For instance, Compassionate Friends is for parents who lost a child. There's groups for people who lost partners. And I think I recently just heard about a sibling loss group. And so those groups for specific losses. And I also just recently heard about groups for people who have experienced divorce, because all of these losses that we're talking about are different, and they all have different, it's a little different landscape.
And when we're talking about it, I use the grief recovery method in my work with clients, and that is a process-driven system of and resource that provides educational tools on how to navigate that grief. And
Yes, so if you're looking for someone like that, there's a grief recovery method. There's someone like me who works more intuitively and works with some of the resources that I'll be talking about in a moment. There's a traditional grief counselor who is more clinically trained. In addition to those kinds of people, there are other resources, like you can find meetups that have grief as a focus. We had a grief meetup for over 3 years when we lived in Raleigh, and that we met on a monthly basis and talked about a specific topic each month, and then we led a conversation with the participants, and it was very well received.
yes, and in addition to that, there are other organizations that are out there that provide support and that sense of community that we're hope to establish with this group in the terms of Death Cafe or the dinnerparty.org.
Yeah, that's a one worth mentioning.
Yeah, we came across it in our research regarding where did the best conversations around grief occur or around life occur is around the dinner party or the dinner table, and became a part of that group, offering a chance to share a meal and a conversation.
Yeah. And you can, if you're listening to this and this sounds intriguing, there are host tables all over the country. So no matter where you are, you can find, if you search for the dinnerparty.org and search for a table, you'll be able to find a table that is in your location. When you mentioned the Death Cafe is something that's been around for, over 25 years, and it came from England. And it's an opportunity not to specifically talk about grief. However, it's an opportunity to normalize conversations about death. And where there is death, there is grief. So the Death Cafe was always very, very, very well attended by a wide variety of people. So it's a really good place to go if you're looking for conversation around all things death. And those conversations happen on many, many, many different topics, everything from what really happens during the cremation.
Yeah, and many different levels. We have had the opportunity to have some very deep conversations about different types of burial, different types of estate planning, a real gamut of ideas and services that are available, particularly when you find yourself in a traumatic situation.
Yeah, we've had young people coming to the meetings saying things like, my grandparents had this happen at their funeral. I don't want that to happen. Is there anything I can do now to make sure that doesn't happen? And yes, there were everything from that to, my mom and dad want to be buried in the same coffin. Can we do that? Well, I don't remember the answer to that question, but nothing is taboo, and it too created community. This was back in Raleigh that we attended, and we found a couple of death cafes here in Minnesota as well. So wherever you are living, you should be able to find that resource.
In addition to the church organizations and as Nancy mentioned, hospice, hospital support staff, and likewise. But moving back really into self-care and what we wanted to
some of the internal resources. What can you do for yourself?
Exactly. So one of the things that we like to try to do in our lives is to remain creative and bring new ideas, not only to the conversations that we have regarding these topics, but also in our personal lives, whether it is coloring with a almost 2-year-old to opening the world of imagination to her. We find opportunities to remain creative, and that's one of the resources that
Yeah,
I use.
creativity was really important to me as I went through my grief journey because it connected me to the essence of who I've always been. And there was a point where I was talking about before grief and after grief, and sometimes I still do, but the essence of who I am has been with me always. I just didn't think she was there, especially in early grief. I thought that the transformation that happened had been a complete break from who I was. And I thought I was going to have to make do with this shell of a person that I was feeling in those early years even. So creativity, early on, I did some collaging that allowed me to put the feelings that I was having that I really didn't want to verbalize because I felt too scary. It gave me an opportunity to put some of those feelings in a collage, in a visual, and I'll put some of those in the membership portal, so you can take a look at what that was, and perhaps you'll be called to do that as well. But those are so as I said, it connected me to who I've always been, and have helped to carry me through that.
Exactly. And another one that we used when we were trying to come back together after having each done our own grief work was taking up dance classes again.
Yeah.
And through movement, and whether it is the routine things that you do every day. I'm a creature of habit, so for me it's very comforting to in the evening before I turn in, I set the coffee pot up. That regular routine helps me and focuses me.
Well, you bring up a good point, because a regular routine after, especially in early grief, can help because we feel like we've lost all control of everything.
Right, and you're going through the same emotion.
Right, so that's one thing that can help normalize your life again, and can help show you that yes, you do have control over these habits in your life.
Right, and for us, it then introduced the ballroom dancing classes that we took as a way of coming back together to learn how to step together and walk in syncopation.
Well, yeah, it was it wasn't just the obvious we're dancing together, but there was a deeper level of learning how to dance through life again together in
Right.
a new way.
And learning the different steps, the different applications, and the nuances of how those motions follow in a rhythm.
Yeah.
Allowed us to flow and move better
And connect at a
together.
deeper level, because I had to, in order to be a good follower, I had to completely give up all of my tendency to want to lead, whether it was in dancing or whether it was in the way we relate as a couple. And so it became more of a give and take rather than one of the things that I think we talked about earlier is that grief illuminates all the places in your life that needs some attention.
Mhm.
And it did that to us in our marriage, and that gave us the opportunity to take a deep look at that and to decide if we wanted to go there and look at it. And from where I'm sitting now, I'm very pleased and grateful that we did that, because our life is fuller than I could have ever imagined, even before we experienced this amazing tremendous loss. So I don't mean to, I mean, amazing just in the fact that I couldn't imagine it ever happening to us. I wanted to talk a little bit more about self-care
Yeah.
because you mentioned it earlier. And yes, all of these things that we're talking about are a part of self-care. But in early grief, you don't feel like dancing. You'd barely feel like getting out of bed. So what's self-care in early grief or in the days after a loss, no matter what that loss is? Even if it's a disappointment that kind of knocked the wind out of you. What is self-care when you are in that kind of situation? What is it for you?
Well, for me, I was able to turn to music and again, finding comfort in a pattern, in a rhythm, in music is something that brought me back to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, exploring men's work was another way of opening the door to something that I really wasn't very familiar with. And that was very helpful into beginning to dive deeper into what my feelings were and what the emotions surrounding the what's next phase of
Mhm.
my grief
Yeah.
was all about.
Sometimes it's just a matter of going outside,
Oh, yeah.
putting your feet in the grass or feeling the sun on your face. That can change my mood even now in a minute. We've finally have some warmer weather here in Minnesota, and the last few days have been just, except for today, we're still on a upward a spiral, I guess, like everybody else. But going outside, knowing, and it's very helpful to know what those self-care rituals are that nurture you, that feed you, and take a look at them again as you feel like you're moving through your grief. They may change. It may not be, I'm going to take a shower every day, because eventually you will want to take a shower again, or eating that. One of the things I talk about all the time is making sure I get enough nourishing food instead of, I just wanted to eat chocolate chip cookies until I could dull the pain of losing Leah. And yes, that worked, but it also put me in a sugar funk that didn't serve me.
One of the things that just came up to my mind is when you were saying, just go outside, feel your toes in the grass. But early on, I felt like putting on my boots and go splash in puddles and just work it out of my system.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. These are questions for you to ask yourself. And I'll put some questions in the portal about how to find out what I call non-negotiable self-care rituals are. Splashing in puddles is a great way to work through. It works on several different levels because it's very playful.
Right.
And it can be it can work through anger. It can start working through anger, and then you start laughing because you're splashing in puddles like you did when you were a kid. So yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And it's a great illustration of find out what works for you. Maybe that doesn't work for you, but maybe lying down looking at the clouds. When we were kids, we used to look at the clouds, and or whatever works for you. Find what works for you.
And that transition that you just said, just another example. You're letting out your anger by splashing in puddles, but then you're laughing because all of a sudden, and there's a transformation.
There's a transformation.
Those are the kinds of things that, that one happens quickly. The ones that we're talking about, we've worked on them for years and still, are
and we still
away.
are. Yeah, we're still peeling the layers.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that is really close to my heart is Samyama, which is the foundation of my work with my clients. And samyama is a mindful, or it teaches present moment awareness, and it helps us to be in our hearts and to be able to feel the feelings in our hearts, one feeling at a time, as they show up in each moment. So it's a way of getting better at feeling our feelings, and it's a way of allowing our hearts, which are our chemical vessels, to begin to transform our feelings. So when I first started using, I turned to samyama with my own samyama practitioner to begin to meet my own grief. And when I saw how powerful it was at helping me to just completely transmute feelings in an instant, eventually in an instant, I became certified as a samyama practitioner in 2009. So that's the foundation of my work. And then all of these other things are the breadcrumbs that we follow as we do this. And I think it's worth mentioning too, that mindful living, when I say mindful living, what comes to mind for you?
Well, making conscious choices. And whether that is regarding your bodily care, the nutrition that you use, that's kind of how I would encapsulate that idea.
Yeah. And being able to make the decisions of everything that we've been talking about mindfully, rather than I was talking about eating chocolate chip cookies. That was mindless eating chocolate chip cookies. Sometimes we mindlessly scroll on Facebook or play video games or watch TV. All of those things you can do mindfully. And when you do them mindfully, I don't do them as long. I am then led to do what's next. So I love that question, because that question can be used all the time in just about every situation.
Yeah, and again, that's that middle part, the transformation part, and whether that's where the magic happens, or where you become aware of the magic, because that, as I said, I was only aware of my transformation looking back at it in retrospect.
Right.
Because when I think back to the devastation that I felt, and the crushing weight of the loss of my daughter, to where I am today, it amazes me that that together we have continued to explore and try to help now the whole conversation about
and to grow. And I also think it's important to mention again the life that we're living now, and the fact that if I hadn't have met my grief all along the way, first in the early days, in the capacity that I could, until I was able to meet it on a deeper level. First of all, I don't know that we would still be together. And I don't know that we would, well, I know that we probably wouldn't have had the capacity to make the move that we just made a year and a half ago, to be closer to our granddaughter and to be the grandparents that we are, which is, I almost don't have words to express her meaning in our lives, and how much we love being near her and being near Peter and his family. So you never know what's coming down the line. So when we talk about planting seeds, we hear about planting seeds all the time. We never know how long it's going to take for those seeds to grow. And in this case, it took over 20 years. So that doesn't mean that there weren't other seeds that grew earlier. But I find that being present lets us know what those seeds are. And I receive that the present moment holds all of the answers that we have. And when we're able to be present in our hearts, we learn to have the capacity to recognize, and then receive the fruits of those seeds. So,
Where else do we? What's next?
what's next? Well, we have been talking for about a half an hour, so let's see if there's any questions to round out the conversation. And you can either put them in the chat or raise your hand. Oops. Okay, just. But we want to let you know that if you're watching this on the replay and you have any questions for us, please get in touch with us. You can always put them into the
Comment section.
The Facebook group. That's
Right.
what I was searching for. You can put them in this Facebook group. You can start a question in there, or you can contact us directly if you. I think you have our email addresses from when you signed up for the course, and or if you want to put in there, if you want to reach out to us and you're not sure how, you can put something into the Facebook group and ask one of us to get in touch with you, and we can do it that way. So there's a lot of ways to get in touch with us. We are excited to hear from you. We're excited to continue this conversation. Any parting remarks?
The question that has always come up for me over the course of doing this work is, what will it take for me to decide to do something for myself? And I think that's a question that a lot of people find themselves in. How do you determine when is the right time to do something for yourself?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and to take that further, what's holding you back from transforming your life into something that is beyond what you're
And what's the cost if you
experiencing?
don't?
Exactly. So
So thank you for listening. We are happy to be with you each month. Next month, we have a really exciting webinar for you, a conversation with someone who's going to talk about ambiguous grief. She is an ambiguous grief specialist and has lived it herself. So she'll be sharing her experience along with some of her suggestions and wisdom on moving through that.
So it's good. Look forward to having a continuing conversation, dialogue in our private Facebook page, and that's where you'll find us as we continue to post.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.